Hello, I am Dr. Loren M. Hill, your academic career advancement coach, and I want to thank you for joining us today. And I have with us today someone who is really going to help us with some practical tips around pulling our CV and resumes together so that we can present ourselves in really the best light in that sort of limited real estate, if you will. So, my guest today is Tiffany Langston. She's also a part of our team here at Acclivity. And I want to welcome you to our podcast, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Hill. I am thrilled to be here.
Good, good. So, why don't we just start off with why you think it's really essential for people to pay attention to their stories in terms of their resumes or their CVs or their bios. Why is that really essential?
In all of these documents, you have a very limited amount of time to make a really great first impression. And so for me, I think it's really critical, and it's hard too. The longer that you're working, the more years you have, the more experiences you have, and that's really hard to distill down into a page or two or three. But I think it's really important to have a really clear idea of your own personal path from whatever it was that got you started to now. And then sort of the beginning and the end are the important part. The middle, we can fit a few things in there, but really folks are going to be looking at what is the most recent thing that you've done and how has your path progressed from the first thing that you did when you started. And having a clear understanding of your story is going to make it much easier to put that into your CV, into your bio, and make it so that the hiring managers who are looking for you can easily find the information that's going to make them want to hire you.
So yeah, I really appreciate that that view, right? So we've worked together now for a few years, and I was trying to remember how we even got connected, but I can't because it's been so long now. But what I do remember is that one of my coaches was needing some assistance around their resume because they were considering looking for a different position. And as I worked with her, I remember thinking, you know what, this resume doesn't really represent you in the way that I know you to be. And if you're looking for another position, we really have to get this tightened up. And so they were referred to you, and you came back with this nice, crisp resume that she was pleased with, I was pleased with, and I do believe, as I recall, because it's been a couple of years, she started getting some immediate callbacks from those resumes. So you were able to work with her on the written part of her story, and I was able to work with her in terms of having that dialogue when she sat across the room from the interviewers. So do you find that people struggle with getting that story right?
Absolutely. And, I have been working in marketing and communications for almost 15 years, and it is really, really hard for me to talk about myself. It is so much easier for me to help other people because I'm on the outside looking in and I'm approaching your resume or your materials the same way that a recruiter or a hiring manager would, because I don't know you. I'm not fully involved in your life. It's a lot harder for me because I know all the backstory. I know all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into every job, every piece of education. And so to me it's a lot easier to work on other people's resumes than my own. And the other thing that I think people struggle with on their resumes is telling everything.
Mm.
You cannot put 20 years of experience into 3 to 4 pages. It is impossible. And so I find a lot of times people have difficulties kind of really honing in on what are those sort of 3 or 4 key whether it be strategies, whether it be successes, and, awards, whatever the case may be, those three to four things per job that are really going to make them, elevate them to the next level as far as their career is concerned.
So you bring up a really good point of distinction again. And right, for the purposes of this part of the interview, we are specifically talking about resumes. And so most of my audience is in the academy. And so they have CVs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the CV is far more comprehensive than a resume. Resumes really, as you mentioned, are the high points. And so oftentimes when we're working with people in higher ed, in the academy, there's no way I can get this down to 2 or 3 pages. And so one of the things that I work with people on is having a hybrid, right? So you can definitely, and I encourage you when you have your CV, that it should be your full body of work, right? If it's 20 pages, it's 20 pages. If it's more, because there are times, particularly when you're submitting for your rank promotion, or a grant or an award or something, where the reviewers want to see everything you've done. You don't want to, leave out anything. But then there's times where you can pare that down. And so if you have, perhaps a 20-page CV, we can get it down to 10, right? We want to get it closer to 10. And then if the situation calls for more information, we would submit the full one. So there's times when I've had an abbreviated one. And then the other thing to consider is your industry, right? So for me, I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist. So my clinical CV looks different than my academic CV. Those look different from my resume. And so I'm sure you all now are like, wait a minute. How many of these do I need to have? And how much work is this going to be? Do not despair. We will help you with those. And so I would say a good strategy is that you have a bio, a resume, and a CV. And if we start with the CV, we can work our way to the bio and the resume, right, Tiffany?
Absolutely. I'm not actually in academia, so I don't have a CV, but I am in marketing and communications, and that spans a wide variety of different, tasks and expertise. So me personally, I actually have 4 resumes. I have a strategic communications resume. I have a digital resume for digital marketing. I have a PR and media relations resume. And then I also have a philanthropic resume because I have done some grant making in the past. That's very different from my communications-based resumes. And the reason that I do this is because a lot of people will tell you to have, customize your resume for every job that you're applying for. And that can be really tedious. But if I have kind of 4 places to start, then the tweaking doesn't have to be, I don't have to go through every single thing. If I'm applying for a role that is very heavily focused on digital marketing, I will start with a digital resume, and then that will help me then kind of adjust that for that particular role instead of having to start from scratch. To your point, the CV is going to have your sort of all of your work, and then it's always easier to take away than it is to add. So you start with that base of knowledge, expertise, education. Then it's a lot easier to kind of reframe or shift it around depending on what kind of thing that you're applying for, whether that be a grant, a role in or outside of academia, or in another sector altogether.
Yes, so I really like that practical piece of what you said in terms of, sometimes you'll hear, and more often than not, have one for every job you apply for. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but what I do subscribe to is the templates, right? So
Exactly.
if you have a template, as you mentioned, for the type of position, then you can fill in, right? So we think in terms of colors, you have sort of your your black and white, and then you color it in with the nuances of the position that you're applying for. And then, you hold that to the side for another job you may apply for in the future that is similar. But you want to be careful, because I've seen people turn in with their packets things that are for a different job, right? So a different workplace or a different university and is coming here, or a different internship and is coming here. And you don't want to do that, right?
Got it. You've got to get the details correct. And I know it's hard, especially if you were looking at multiple roles at a time. But it's the small things. I will tell you, a hiring manager is looking at this document, trying their best to knock you out. And so you don't want to give them the easy way because you didn't get the name right, you misspelled something, you didn't get the hiring manager's name right, whatever the case may be. Get the small details correct. Make it hard for them to kick you out of this process.
So you are skilled at this. Let's kind of back up a bit. What got you into this area?
It's really funny. So I am one of those people who feels like life is too short to work at a job that is no longer serving me, whether that be my financial needs, whether that be my professional development needs, my career advancement needs, or even my mental health and well-being needs. And so if one were to look at my particular resume or my LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, you'll see that I have quite a few jobs in the 15 years that I have been a part of the professional workforce. And that is exclusively because the role that I was at the time stopped serving me for one of those four reasons. And people have always, my friends, colleagues, always seemed to notice that I would be looking for a job, would get lots of interviews and things like that, and was consistently getting new roles and progressing, going from a manager to a director to I've been part of the C-suite in the past as well. And so it really kind of started from well, you're good at looking for jobs, like help me look for a job. And then I, helped a friend who I think, introduced me to somebody who introduced me to you. And so I don't, publicize or advertise my services. All of the work that I do, this is all word of mouth. These are all people who either, came to me because they knew somebody who worked with me. I'm now working with a couple of people who have come back to me because we had successful relationships in the past. But honestly, I love helping people find the job that's going to make their lives better, whether that be more money so that they can buy a house, or more money so they can retire, or better work-life balance. And I think especially I won't say coming out of COVID-19, since it is still, up and kicking, but what happened during the pandemic and how people are approaching their jobs, everything it's shifting and evolving. People are saying, you want me to be in the office 5 days a week? We weren't all in the office 5 days a week 5 years ago, right? Everything is changing now, and you need to be willing to be flexible. And this is both workers and, people who are employers and employees. You've got to be kind of, sensitive to how things are going, and to be flexible, and to create those materials to get the job that you want. If that job is 5 days in the office, great. If that job is fully remote, great. Know that those fully remote jobs are going to be a lot more difficult to find because they're becoming fewer and fewer. Not to say that you can't still get them, but know and understand that your materials need to highlight that you can work self-directed. You don't need to, have in-person, face-to-face time, that you're good at, managing yourself and others, without having a lot of oversight yourself. And these are all words and phrases and things that you can put into your resume to really sort of lift you up if that's the type of role that you want.
So what I really, really resonated with you on, well, there's a number of things, but I so appreciate that you gave voice to finding something that works for you, right? That being your primary motivation. Because I think that oftentimes, particularly as women and women of color, we are in positions because of a bunch of external needs, and not to discount those. You have a family, you have to live off of something, but we don't always have to pursue or stay on a job that is not rewarding to us. And frankly, maybe even killing us, taking, sucking our souls out or taking our life from us. And so, what we also do here and at Acclivity is help people find their sanity and their joy, right? So maybe you can't leave the job that you're currently at because you've invested a lot of time in it. Maybe you're tenured, maybe you're seeking a particular path. But how can we strategize to help you be fulfilled in a number of ways? And one of those ways might be, finding something outside of the institution, right? Many of us have other skill sets that we can highlight and demonstrate and kind of maybe get a little high side hustle that gives us some joy. So, what are your thoughts about that?
I so appreciate you saying that sometimes you're in a job that is bad for your health. I had a job once where I had high blood pressure for the first time in my whole life.
Mm,
My hair was falling out, and that was when I was like, no, no, no. I have been trying to make this work. I've been hustling. I've been doing everything that I can, and there that was my point where I was like, nope, I have to find something else. Um, Side hustles. I have many of them, including doing resumes and helping folks with their interview materials. Um, but I 100% agree. I feel like I was brought up at a time where a lot of people, women of color, put a lot of their value, and I'm talking about myself. Here I am. Put a lot of my self worth and value in what my title was,
mm,
right? Like, I can't go to this job because I have to step down from the last job. What will people think of me taking going from a director to a manager or whatever
right.
the case may be? And I think as I've learned throughout my career that the work is the stuff that I do so that I have the money to do the things that I enjoy doing.
Hmm.
But it took a really long time to do that. As a Black woman, and there's a myriad of research about Black women, make less money than their counterparts, get burnt out, all the. And I said, I refuse to be somebody else's statistic. I'm working for me. And if that means that I take a job that is a whole different, sector, a step down, a step up, a step sideways, whatever the case may be, if it serves me, that's all that matters to me. But I work so that I have money to travel. A lot of people who say stuff like, if you do a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. No, not, I do not subscribe to that. If I find a job I love, fantastic, but it is still work because the things I do for fun are not the things I
Hmm. Hmm. Well, it's definitely important for us to maintain a worldview that is open and optimistic, right? And I think that, we've been conditioned to get a job, keep a job, and for a number of reasons, some of we've already listed, but it really does matter what our title, our position, our all of those things, right? And hey, I raise your hand if you've been at a job where your hair was falling out or you lost too much weight or you gained too much weight or whatever. Those are all indicators of stress and it not being a healthy environment for you, right? So once you are able to identify very clearly something is not right here, then we set about the path of making things right. And sometimes making things right is telling your story, giving that voice, finding an exit strategy, or finding some support, whether it's internal or external to the institution. And though, those are all things that we work on here and we want to help you with. One thing that I want to sort of revisit is telling our story, right? So, as you mentioned at the top of the interview, we talked a bit about having your bio and your all these things in writing, right? And so, one thing that I learned years ago, and I can't at this point even remember who I learned it from, But I was had my bio written up. I was getting an award somewhere, and I had someone read it to me, right? And I was like, wow, she's pretty fabulous, right? Who is that person? And from that point on, I was like, okay, the person said, have somebody read the bio to you so you can hear it in somebody else's voice. Because oftentimes we're just going about the work and it goes in one ear and out the other. But if we're revisiting our bio and our story, maybe twice a year, it can help us feel good about what we're doing. Because oftentimes when we're in positions that we aren't being acknowledged in, we may feel unappreciated or underappreciated. What are your thoughts, Tiffany?
I think that is fantastic. I do something similar. Um, Primarily when I need my own personal hype person and I don't have anybody available to me, I'll actually put my bio in one of those AI things and have it talk to me. Because I was like, if it talks to me in a computerized, very sort of unemotional voice and it still sounds good, it's good. So I love having someone else read it to you. I subscribe to that myself.
Oh my goodness. Well, see, we just traded tips because now I'm going to have AI read my bio to me. And the other thing about it is when someone else or something else is reading it to you, not only will you be hyped, but you'll also probably remember some stuff that should go in that isn't in, right? Like, oh, I forgot to mention this or that and the other, which is also why I want to come back to having someone work on your CV, bio, resume alongside with you because they will be able to fill in some of the missing gaps, right?
Absolutely. And I'd say one of the things that I find really helpful that I find most people don't do, because a lot of people dust off their resume when it's time to look for a job. So if they've been in a place for 10 years, they haven't seen that resume since 10 years ago. And then you're sitting down, you've been somewhere 10 years, like, I got to write this resume so that I can, position myself for a new role. And then you've forgotten 95% of the things that you have done.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I do is at the end of every month, I write at least one big win I had. I keep it in like a Google Doc so that when it comes time for me to update my resume, when it's time for me to look for something new, I have a list of all the things that I did well, and I don't have to be going through emails, going through calendar invites, going through note documents. I have it all there for me, and then it makes it a lot easier to update those materials so that I can be ready to go as quickly as possible.
I really like that. And I actually use that as part of our program. And what I advise people in the academy to do is to update it as soon as they have a publication or have done a presentation, some scholarship, some committee, do it then, right? Because it's better to check in and pop stuff in once you've signed up for the committee and been accepted, or once you've received the grant. Then, like you said, next year or 2 years when you're getting ready to go up for rank promotion, or you got to put your materials together, trying to sort through all of that stuff can just be so time consuming, and you're probably going to miss some items.
I am working with a client right now, and I think I've gotten 8 emails from them for a presentation they just forgot about. They're like, oh, by the way, blah, 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 this presentation. Get another email, and they're like, oh, by the way, I forgot about, have all of it written down. Make it
Yeah.
easy for yourself.
And the thing too that I have found when working with people is that there may be a time where we just have to block out some time to get organized, right? Okay, we're not going to beat each other up here because you haven't looked at this in 4 or 5 years. Okay, pause on that. And let's just get some folders, in your cloud that say presentations or posters or committee, and then just, drop those items in there. The main thing is to consolidate them or compile them somewhere where you can access them easily when you need it.
Absolutely.
So when we think about, telling our story, updating our stuff, staying on top of things, and really getting it together, because We should always be looking for opportunities because believe it or not, opportunities are always looking for us, and we may not be aware of it. I mean, it's so funny because just this past week, I went to a training and was chatting with the president of the organization afterwards, just giving him some feedback on how I thought the training went. And then he said, "Oh, I'd love to follow up with you later." And so we exchanged cards. And that day, his chief of staff reached out to me and said, "Oh, Dr. Hill, we're submitting for a grant that's due on Monday. Send us your materials." And I was panicked because I was like, okay, you know, I guess thanks, but now I got to put this stuff together. And fortunately for me, I had just done a refresh on one of my resumes because I said, "Do you need a resume, a CV? What's going to serve you?" And they were like, "Well, we'd like to have both and any certificates that you have." So put it together. Took me, maybe 20 minutes to get everything together. But had I not already had things where I could just put my fingertips on it, I would have been struggling over the weekend to update some stuff or pull it together. And so, again, that's just one example of you never know when you may be invited or asked to have to participate in something, and you want to be as ready as possible.
Absolutely. The number of people who I've worked with who said, "Oh yeah, I'm coming to you because 3 months ago I saw the perfect job for me, but my materials weren't up to date." And keep your materials close to up to date so that when those opportunities come about, you are ready for them. You can get in early. You don't let that opportunity pass you by.
Mhm. Well, this is all so fascinating. And I am so happy that you have been able to share some things with us today. And I wonder if there were two things that our listeners could do like today, right? So easy, meaning like, oh, I just listened to this, I just watched it. Here's something I can do today. What would those two things be?
Yeah, I've got two tips for you. One is that one of the things that I find is that people, when they have roles where they have gotten promoted in the same organization, whether it be, going from assistant, professor to associate to professor, they do a lot of repetition, right? I am certain that you have developed curriculum, advised students, and administered evaluated exams in every job that you've had. You do not have to write it 5 times. Write it once. Write it once for your sort of your lowest level, your assistant or your assistant level role, and then for each additional associate professor, talk about the stuff that makes your new position different than your old position. Then once
Mm,
you list your classes, because your classes are probably different, they will already know that you administered exams, you developed curriculum. You do not have to say it 3 times. You are wasting valuable space to really talk about the areas where you have grown and progressed within your career at that institution.
that's great. That's great. So we're not going to be repetitive and waste valuable space. What's another one?
The second one, and this one's going to be super easy. And it is, as a communications person, this almost pains me to say, but on your resume, any time where you have written out a number, go back and make numerals instead. And the reason why is because a hiring manager is going to be scanning your resume for maybe 90 seconds. Words run together, numbers stand out. So instead of saying 1,000 and writing it out, put the numeral, even though that doesn't always necessarily adhere to writing standards if you're writing a paper. But on this document, numerals are going to stand out and draw the hiring manager's eye to the things that you want to point at, to budgets, numbers of
Mm,
people that you managed, grants, all of those things. Put those numbers there and make like it's like shining a spotlight on them.
yes, yes. I'm so glad you said that because when you see, um, it was the PI for a $5 million grant, right? you see that 5 there and you see million, we all know what that means, or
Yes,
1 million,
exactly.
or 3.5, whatever, right? So I agree with you on that. We want to see that number because it is going to pop off the page. So
Exactly.
thank you so much for spending time with us today, Tiffany, and talking to us about ways in which we can tell our stories on our bios and CVs and resumes. And I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're part of our team. And I want to thank our audience today for listening and joining us. And once again, I am Dr. Loren M. Hill, your academic career advancement coach. We ask that you like and share and comment, and we look forward to being with you next time. Thank you.